name is Ken Lain. I own Waters Garden Center. And so how does Ken Lain come to own Waters Garden Center? Well, I married a Waters. So Harold Waters started the garden center in Prescott back in 1962. This is our 60th year in business. And so we did lose Harold this last February. He was 85 years old. It was sad, but he just got that in the 80s. Be careful when you're in your 80s. If you trip and fall, it could be, you break stuff. And so he just didn't recover from that. So we're sad to see him go. Lorna's still doing great. For you folks that have been here for a while, you know, Harold and Lorna were in the business up until 2002. And then he would come in every week and advise me on how I should do things from that point forward until February. So, but anyway, it's family business. I now have four kids, 3 daughters, 1 son. So my son's in the Army. He's a PA. He's currently at Fort Hood. That's just up by Waco in Texas area, okay? I've got a daughter, my oldest, who lives in Austin, Texas. She is married, and we just found out on Father's Day. She called me and said, "Dad, I wanted you to be the first one to know, but we're pregnant." So, yeah, that's good. So, and to let your dad know before anyone else, that's what she told me at least, and I'm sticking with it. It's good enough. And then I've got, my boy's got 3 kids, so a 10, 7, and 4-year-old, so that's a joy. And then I just sent one of my identical twin girls. They jumped in a car this morning at 6 o'clock, and one of them, they're going to sisterhood it across to Austin, Texas. So I'll have 2 Austinites. Is that what you call them? My Austinite, is that? Oh, there we go. I got it right. Totally guessed. So native of Austin. So in case you want to know who to razz or cheer on, she's right there. Anyway, they're going to land this evening in Austin. She's moving. So the big city's calling. Again, Prescott kids. This town's too small for me. So they're going off to the big city until they do their city thing. They kind of go, I miss my little town. And so they seem to come back often. So her twin sister, so Megan and Mackenzie, the M&M girls. So Megan's gonna make her way in Austin. Mackenzie's gonna come back, and she's training to take over the business, the 3rd generation to run the business. So I'm proud of that. So yeah, thank you. So we've learned a thing or two about gardening in the area. So we've farmed all over the county. I looked at this elk. Do we have elk in the community here? I don't think yet, do we? So we've got mule deer, which you folks from, I think the Texas deers, they're not Texas size. They're cute. You just want to pet them. They're just so pretty. And then we got mule deer, which are they're like cows. Then you got elk. So just on the other side of the mountain here, we do have herds of elk that roam around Skull Valley. There's another herd over towards Baghdad. They're coming up towards Copper Basin, that area. So we're starting to see that. They're like in the ranch land is what they're doing. So where the horses are out, they're just jumping the fence. I raised my family in Skull Valley, which is 15 miles north of here. And there we had a herd of 15, 20 that come over every evening and water at Kirkland Creek and then go back to wherever they go. So we do have them here. So you've got you've got mule deer, javelina. I've heard those are out here, right? So yeah, jackrabbits and regular rabbits and pack rats galore. There's herds of pack rats that roam around in the boulders. So you're dealing with all kinds of stuff out here. Have you tried to dig a hole yet? So it's hard pan underneath about this much granite. And so it can be a little bit of a challenge here. Today I want to cover Firewise. What does that mean? And then a few garden tips on how to keep those native evergreens really healthy. We are in a drought. I know we've had 1 rainstorm. That does not get you out of a drought. We've had several years of really stressing out the plants. And so some of your evergreens are at great risk, especially the ponderosas, pinyon pines, even the manzanitas, you're seeing the middles of them die out. That's all drought stress. And so these plants have been there for hundreds of years, but that was before drought and before we took your neighborhood and changed all the way the water flows. with rooftops and driveways and gutters and curbs. That's changing. So that sometimes you need to handhold some of these plants, or they're prone to bark beetle, Ips beetle, flathead borer, scale. I've never seen spider mites like I have this year, so I'll go over some of that. So we'll go over Firewise stuff, how to water, how to fertilize and take care of these things and to keep the bugs out. So I want to do all that in about 50 minutes or less. And then we'll leave about 10, 15 minutes at the end. This is a big enough crowd that we kind of got to control that a little bit, or we won't, but I'll stay as long as you want for Q&A at the end. Does that seem fair enough? So we did have a fire here. The mountain was burning. What was that, 10, 15 years ago? It was pretty bad. It was pretty scary for a while. It was touch and go, like for the whole town, not just American Ranch. I mean, the entire town could go. All it takes is a wind change and it just comes at you. So you need to think in terms of that way. Now, folks that aren't used to that, they're terrified of fire. It's not a tornado. It's not like things you can't run, an earthquake. We've got time to maneuver out of the way of these things. But you need to always be aware that this could be a potential. You need to be ready for these things. Your landscape needs to be accordingly. So now firefighters, they want to protect your property. As long as you care enough to do a little bit of maintenance, they're gonna defend that thing almost to the death. So if you don't do anything, you just let it all grow wild, they're going, pass, and they move to the next one. They're gonna plant their flag on the properties that they can actually make a difference. And so if you take some care, it's a game changer. So what do? So first of all, just clearing things up. We have what's called ladder fuel. You need to think in terms of fire. As long as it's on the ground, firefighters can fight that all day long. They don't mind that, as long as it's on the ground. The second it jumps up to the junipers, the pinyon pines, the ponderosas, it's over. They can't do anything. They just can run to the next property. So a slurry bomber can maybe slow it down, but the second it gets up, it's just this 100-foot flame. How do you put that out? So you need to think in terms of how do I keep that fire on the ground where the firefighters can take care of it. So we do what's called island planting. So we'll have areas of native landscapes that they can protect. And so if it goes up in flames, it's just right here. It's not the entire property. And we're giving them breaks where the firefighters can work in between the islands of typically evergreens. So things that have needles are like matchsticks. You need to think in those terms. And we have mainly here, we have ponderosas, pinyon pines. Those are the ones that can really go up. It doesn't even take a matchstick. It just takes one ember to float over, light on that, and it just goes up. And so the biggest offender of all of them, you wouldn't think this. It looks so tough, but manzanita is just, if it's 100 degrees, it wants to go up in flames. You got to really protect. You don't want that next to your house. You want it out there, away from the house. It's super drought hardy, beautiful red wood, evergreen. It's a pollinator. It actually brings in the bees. It's one of the food sources early on. Hummingbirds, as they're migrating, they're using that as a food source. So it's got everything we want here, but it's really not Firewise. So that's one you want to keep away from the eaves of the house. You don't want to have those underneath the, let's say a ponderosa pine or pinyon pine. Every plant that you see, you kind of go, let's say it's, how tall does manzanita get? About head high, something like that, some of the mature ones. So the flame will go up about 3 times the mass of that foliage. So you can easily have a 20-foot flame from a manzanita. So you don't want those underneath your ponderosas or your pinyon pines, your big alligator junipers, shaggy barks, these big junipers, these big native evergreens. You want to keep those out. I don't mind a little bit of undergrowth underneath those if it's just pine needles. Everyone wants to rake all the pine needles up and get them off their yards. You don't want to do that. The firefighters, they can fight that because you got this much duff from needles. What's the flame on that? 3 times. They can fight a flame like this, easy. It's when it jumps from that to the manzanita, from that to the junipers, from that to your pinyon pines, and from that to your ponderosas. That's called ladder fuel. So just keep it down on the ground and you're okay. The reason we don't clear off all of that undergrowth, all that duff, all that pine needle undergrowth, is because if you clear all that off, all of a sudden the sun bakes the roots and it sunburns the soil. So you want to clear some of that off, but you want to keep a layer of it on to keep the water, the moisture in that soil at that root level base. And so I see overkill sometimes, these over extremes. And so a balanced approach I find is probably better, healthier for the plants. So it's okay to have a little bit of it. The other one to watch is, so for mine, I'm up in that Prescott Lakes, Eagle Ridge, up above the high school area in town. I've got some majestic junipers. I mean, they are over the top. I mean, ancient. You can't take 2-3 men to get your arms around them. And so I've pruned them up because they're pieces of art when you clean them up. These big, like multi-trunked alligator junipers. The texture on it is so beautiful. I've got artwork underneath it that I downlight and show off. And then I actually uplight the tree because it's art. But the main reason I pruned it up was not for that. It was so that I can keep the fire from, I don't want these branches to touch the ground. I want them pruned up so that the firefighters have room to maneuver. They have room to, keeps the ladder fuel down. But then I'm taking that and turning it into a positive. So I'm cleaning things up, the dead wood out of there so that I can show off the character of this tree. And so that's junipers, they want to burn. So, but there's a way to have that in the yard without having to worry about it. And so that's how I do it. It can be a real, any dead wood in your yard, not good. Get rid of it. Overgrown manzanita and mahogany, Mount Mahoganies, Apache plumes, cliff rose, they're all the stuff that's growing wild in your yard. They're beautiful, but they can get overgrown. Just open it up and clean it up. And all of a sudden you take this wild form and turn it into a real gem, a real beauty, a gem of the yard. So I'm using those as anchors to the natives. And then I'm planting some things that don't burn. So I'm going to give you some examples of Firewise plants. You can have plants that actually will mitigate fire. So you have you got a wildfire raging across the forest. It's just burned 110,000 acres of forest. All of a sudden it hits a grove of aspens. That fire instantly goes right to the ground because aspens are Firewise. They don't burn easily. They got to be in the flames for hours before they finally start to take off and burn. So it's God's way of naturally giving a fire break into the forest. And so you've got the same thing going on in your own yard. You can take certain plants and it actually won't burn it. Think camping in the day. So you take, let's say you get the campfire at night. You've been on a hunt. You're going for elk. You want the trophy. And so you're out there with guys at the end of the day, gals. Some of you are butchers too. You know who you are. So you're out there comparing notes or fish stories. I saw the biggest bull I've ever seen. Oh my gosh, I just couldn't quite get the shot. You're comparing stories. You're taking this branch from an evergreen, you throw that on the fire and it just goes up like this. Whew, very smoky. It burns instantly. You're taking some oak or poplar or aspen, some of these others, you throw those in the fires and they just sit there and smolder and they just don't burn, they don't catch. It takes forever. Those are the ones that are left over the next morning. They still haven't finished burning. Whereas your pine needles and pine things did. They've got a lot of natural pitch in them. So they've got a lot of oils in that structure of that plant, which makes them very drought hardy, but also makes them burn much easier than, let's say, a water-based sap that's in that plant. You throw that on there like a poplar, locust, ash. These are all plants that don't burn the leafy things, the deciduous plants. Those things that lose their leaves in the winter, those are typically Firewise. And better to have closer to the house, on the patio, next to, those are better to have in that zone 2, closer to the house. As you get further out, we're dealing with big properties here. As you get further out, let's say 70, 100 feet out from the house, that's where you have your evergreens, pine trees. Now, with that being said, you Californians, you know who you are. I won't call you out. It's not as many as you think you are. So Californians take a bad rap, but we're from everywhere. I meet folks from Seattle to Denver to East Coast. They're from just half of them are California. So you take the bulk of but we're all from someplace else, most of us. And so the Californians, though, tend to take it extreme. So they tend to want to clear cut the whole property, and it changes the character. The reason you bought in this community is for that rustic, Western ranchette kind of lifestyle. You want some of those native plants out in that landscape. You want to take that. And I think it's okay to actually, I'm glad I don't have the fire chief here. I just did a podcast with him the other day. So we debate a little bit back and forth. He wants nothing in zone 1. That's the first few, yards of your house. He wants nothing but, patio furniture and concrete. Okay, but if some of you have built your house around this Pinyon pine that's a character piece. I mean, it's hundreds of years old. Literally changed, the architect changed where the house is built to keep this thing. You need to keep that healthy, and I think it's okay to have one. I've talked to the firefighters in the field. If there's one big evergreen sitting there and they know you've really tried and things are cleaned up and they can defend this, what they'll do is they'll just cut the tree down and drop it into the fire. They'll just drop it right down to the ground and keep it so they can protect the structures. There's ways for them to counter that. And they've got chainsaws for a reason. So I think it's okay to have a few key things as long as you don't have those ladder fuels. Long as you don't allow something underneath this to catch that on fire. Does that make sense? So islands, as you get further out, you can keep that other patch of manzanitas. They're beautiful. You can keep some of those, but they're out here, then you give them some space in between so they can work through that. Tomatoes. Isn't that cute? It's got cute two little tomatoes on there. Brought that for you vegetable gardens. You can only buy this at Waters Garden Center. So it just helps. Vegetables they're Firewise. They tend to be high moisture content. So I think it's okay to have a vegetable garden just off the back patio. It's not gonna, the flames, the ash is gonna float on this and it's not gonna catch. So I think that this is okay plant foliage to have out there. That's the only reason I brought it, because it's vegetable season. And we do grow amazing tomatoes here. It's okay to garden next to your house. So sometimes you get these extremes. There, that lesson's done. Won't show that off yet. Here's what I'm going for. So anything that has something like this is a Mugo Pine. It's a dwarf pine. It's cute. It's drought hardy as can be. It takes full sun. Nothing eats it. It's got all the things you want for your landscape. It's not Firewise. So it's very heavy in pitch. It's got that oily sap instead of a watery sap inside the structure. It does stay small though, so it's easy to control. I would put this in the league as, let's say, manzanita. Some of these other native kind of plants. It's that tough too. Once it gets established, it goes by itself. But I wouldn't put this right next to my house underneath the eaves or next to the patios where it can now light up your rooftop. So the other one to really watch, people don't think about, I don't know what the fence code is out here, but you really don't. Cedar Fence sometimes comes up to your house. It's a matchstick. It's just kind of like, it's like a fuse. It catches on fire and it just finally goes right to the house and it burns until it gets underneath the eaves and then it goes, boom, the whole house goes. Firefighters, they can mitigate some of that, but sometimes Cedar Fence is not ideal going up next to your house. This is another one this is probably the most popular. I've got quite a few rental properties here. I have some real estate that I kind of do. I like this one because renters cannot kill it. So, and it's pretty, it's green, it's got everything that you want. This is a juniper. This is a spread. This is a just big ball, green-shaped juniper. It's perfect, super easy care. You can't kill it. Bugs don't eat it. Javelina mock it. Just they detest the taste. And so it's got everything that you want, but it's not Firewise. I wouldn't put it right next to my house or next to a cedar fence, next to things. I'd put it out there by itself as a when I have my new hot tub. I don't want you watching me hot tub. I'll use this to screen it so you can't quite see it. Living walls. It easily goes up to about like this, trims nicely, but not Firewise. Again, it's a conifer. It's got a needle to it. These are probably the things that are going to burn easier. So if you got to think, which one should I go? And you're going to you got a handout of the Firewise plants here shortly. It's got the list to kind of the go-to list. These are not on that list. Okay, those are examples of. What do you think of this? I brought it as an example. What do you think? Firewise or not Firewise? Grass. Grass is Firewise. The reason being, okay, you're thinking fuel count, you're right. But this usually turns brown in the winter when we're out of the fire hazard areas. It's also very short grass. This only gets up. This is getting to be mature. So most grasses have high water content to them during the fire season. So our fire season just started. Usually it started early this year in June into May. Usually it doesn't. In fact, that first fire we had up in Flagstaff, firefighters, I was talking to them, they didn't even have equipment out. It was still in storage. They didn't even have it ready to go because we weren't expecting things to be that dry that early. Usually it's middle of June we start to have that. So seasons do change. It is getting earlier, but usually this is when the start of the season, this is just barely starting to grow. Usually you'll cut this back. And then it's pretty high water content. You treat this like you would a shrub or a tree. You put it on that same kind of irrigation system, water it a couple times a week. And that's enough to keep it looking lush and full and green. Then the winter when it's dry, so it will actually burn in the winter, but we're cool. We don't typically have forest fires in the winter. And then at that point, you're cutting this off so it can restart. So I brought it as a tease for you going, not everything is the way you think it is. Okay? This is one of my favorites. You notice foliage. It's got a leaf instead of a needle. This is Spirea. It's kind of an old-fashioned plant. Your grandparents probably grew this exact plant. This is an Anthony Waterer. I brought it because it's pretty. It's got the right size. I'm trying to inspire you to have a nice landscape, not just rock, a boulder, and maybe a tree out there. We can have nice landscapes and be Firewise. This is one I brought for you specifically because you've got so many animals out here. Animals don't like the taste of Spirea. Yet it takes full sun, put it right out there in the landscape, surround it in chocolate-colored rock, then take a blow dryer at it and then curse at it. It's still going to be okay out in the landscape. It's going to like that. So it gets up about, I don't know, kind of moundy shape, kind of a ball shaped to it, just pretty long blooming. It is deciduous, that is, it will lose its foliage in the winter, but it's a great plant from the mountains of Arizona. It likes this 4-season climate. Deer do not eat this. It looks delicious. Like I want a little ranch dressing and kind of try some, but they don't seem to like this. And another companion to this is Potentia. You're seeing it starting to bloom with a yellow flower to it. Gets up kind of ball-shaped, about knee-high or so. That's another one we put out there in the landscape. You'll see that in your neighbor's yards quite a bit. Potentia or Potentella for you folks from the Midwest. You don't pronounce the double L's in the Southwest, but those are companion plants. Very Firewise. From a short, it also stays short. So you'd have to take a blowtorch to it for 30 minutes before it actually get dry enough to actually burn. And then even then it would burn cooler than, let's say, a pine tree or manzanitas. This I brought because we're famous for our wildflowers here. This is wildflower country. This is Echinacea or cone flower. It's another name it goes by. Now your grandparents grew this and it was just purple, only purple. They only had one choice 20 years ago. Now we're starting, it's such a robust plant for here, we're starting to bring more of these in different colors. So it's a new color. You've never seen yellow before. So this is, what's the name on this? Lemon yellow Echinacea. It just screams lemon yellow. Now I like to garden for the birds myself. And so I've got berry plants along the fence. I've got grapes along the fence. The upper part of the fence are for me. And the grandkids and I will go out and pick blackberries until our faces are just black. We'll eat grapes until we're just almost sick. But there's a joy about, you can teach this garden outdoorsy thing. You can get kids off those screens just by showing them the joy of gardening. They think that, grandsons, and food kind of go together, don't they? So that's the way we do that. Birds, I'll leave the lower half just for the birds. I don't pick them, just let them go. And then I'll plant things like this back there for my winter birds. So this, if you deadhead this, so when this gets done blooming, pinch this off, it'll form, you're just seeing more buds come up right behind it. I'll keep pinching that back so more flowers go until about September, October. Then I let it go to seed with that last set of flowers. And then these seed heads, my smaller finches, sparrows, the things that winter over with me, they'll use this as a food source in the backyard. It gets up about, this tall or so. And so you can actually attract birds. We're actually on the migration pattern for most birds. And so they're using the water, the Verde River, they're using we're the city of 5 lakes for a reason. Birds love it here. And so they're using us as a stopping point as they go north and south. So you can attract an obscene number. Like we've had 98 different kinds of birds we've identified at the garden center. We're not even trying. And so you can see that I've seen a bald eagle float across my backyard before. He didn't land, so I can't actually call him. He was in my yard. But you see him hovering. He was using first of all, I have a pond. Water is cheating with birds, so they just come. And they're almost a nuisance at this point. They get so loud, you can hardly hear yourself think sometimes, especially in the morning. But this is one that I use to attract them. Very fire-wise. Again, most wildflowers they're considered drought hardy, fire-wise, full sun, most of them. They're just good plants for here. How are we doing? Oh, we're okay on time. Okay, let's do this one. Let's see. Boxwood. What do you think? Fire-wise or not? It is. Yes, very much so. Again, this is an evergreen. Like this pine, they're both evergreens, but this is using water as a sap instead of resin. So that's the difference. So the actual sap inside the plant makes it more fire-wise. Again, animals don't eat this. I was trying to think, what do you all have? What are you all dealing with? Javelina is the number one thing I hear out here, and the pack rat's number 2, and that's mule deer and some of the others. But the animals aren't going to eat. Unusual. I've heard more stories out this Williamson Valley corridor. Porcupine. I've had more sightings of porcupine out here. They're sitting down. I just had one of your neighbors sat down, and it's peeling off the bark of the pine tree. And so porcupine come out at night. You don't typically see them. And they're real slow moving. They just kind of methodically, and they love to eat bark or the cambium layer. Underneath the bark, that new wood is really soft and sweet. And so they'll sit there and they'll just pick this tree apart. So you'll see typically bark stripped off about 2-3 feet at the base. They'll just sit on the ground and just sit there and eat the tree. They can climb, so sometimes they'll climb up the tree and they'll eat the main crotches of the branch structure. They'll kind of sit up in a limb and kind of sit there and go. They're kind of lazy. They're lazy animals. And so they just sit there and they're the only ones that'll peel bark off towards the lower areas. Now, sometimes deer can rub their antlers on, let's say, poplars, willows, apple trees, some of the wood things, like deciduous branches. I've seen them do that to elms. But you can tell deer have a different marking. They're roughing up the bark instead of stripping it off. So porcupine are the only ones that'll do that. So just different this year than last. There must be more porcupine than normal. I don't know. So, okay. Oh, anyway, boxwood gets up. There's different heights, different sizes, different shapes. They all seem to do amazingly well here. And the reason is they got this shiny, waxy foliage to it. So it makes them very drought hardy. So it's kind of an East Coast plant, I realize, but there's a place for it that looks really good. By the pool, it's not messy. It doesn't drop a lot of leaves. It's not going to mess up your skimmers and stuff, so there's a place for it. Okay, I brought this one, 2 of them here. So let's start with this one. This is a summer plant. You only see this at the garden center in the summer. This is a Penta, P-E-N-T-A, Penta. Pentas are a hummingbird-like landing pad. They cannot resist pentas. They love. This butterfly bush is a great big shrub. They like those. This is a cute one by the patio containers. You want to bring the butterflies closer to the gardens. You can do that just by planting certain kinds of plants. This is one. Pentas are just great for that. So I brought that as a pollinator. This is Firewise. It's cute and small, but it's mainly a butterfly attractor. I brought this one because we're going into mosquito season. This is called a scented geranium. The way I use scented geraniums myself is I'll plant these in my containers towards the outer edge. So as we love to entertain. So you're in the backyard, we're grilling, we're going to watch a sunset, sipping a glass of wine, and you're brushing up against this, and all of a sudden you're going, what is that smell? It's scented geraniums. It's got this fragranty, citrusy smell to it. But really what I'll do is, before the party happens, at the end of the day, dusk, when the mosquitoes come out, flies, one mosquito or one fly, the party's over. All the girls are heading inside, and it's just done. Okay, so I'll use this, and I'll mist the foliage down at the end of the day, and you can smell the whole thing just come alive. And as that patio fills up with this fragrance, it pushes those nuisance of an insect away. It's a natural insect repellent. It's called, it does have a bloom to it, but really I'm planting this thing will turn into this great big round foliage, but I'm planting it for that fragrance and the smell. Here, I'll pass that around. Just kind of rub the foliage, just kind of pass it that away. Scented geraniums, Firewise, but I brought it as a lesson there's a way to plant things to keep the insects away from your area where you want to enjoy the backyard. Okay, 3 more. These are all Firewise. You're seeing this bloom all around town. Anyone know what it is? Mexican primrose, exactly right. This is a weed, okay? Don't plant this in the middle of your flower bed. It will choke off everything except for this. But there's a place. Some of you are up in those boulders where it's hard to get things to grow. And so you can plant this in there and it'll kind of spread in between the rocks. I usually will plant this in my gardens right next, just where the irrigation just misses, like it barely gets any water. That's where you plant this. Then it just kind of takes off and spreads. This is as tall as it gets, but it's unlimited how wide it will get. So it kind of runs, touches the ground, spreads a new one, runs, touches the ground, spreads another one. So Mexican primrose, very tough, Firewise, and just a bulletproof plant. I don't think it's a pollinator. It's just pretty, easy care. You can't kill the thing. So it's a good drought-hardy plant for here. Yeah, you kind of need javelina to eat it sometimes to keep it in check. So it still comes back. So I'm hearing javelina love it. So yeah. It is a true perennial. It'll hibernate underground in the winter. Kind of these last few will be perennials. They'll hibernate underground and then come back fresh the following spring. This is one that starts to bloom in the summer and then blooms through fall. That's its season, okay? This is one I brought. We're famous for our Russian sage, which is a blue spiky plant up about hip high or so. Just this blue foliage, blue spiky flower. It can be a bit weedy, so it tends to be overgrown, over aggressive. Gets almost becomes a problem. Starts to reseed in the yard. It runs everywhere. And so it can be a high maintenance plant. And I think we keep them alive too long. A Russian sage, once it gets past 5 to 7 years old, it just gets mangy looking, has a look to it, kind of going, it's not what it used to be. It pops right out of the ground, just a shovel will pop it right out. I think we need to replace them a little more often, and it gets rid of some of that weediness. And then we've got new introductions. We've got dwarfed varieties of Russian sage now that we're starting to introduce, called lacy blue. There's different colors, but there's shorter varieties that are less prone to become weedy. But I designed this one in quite often. Oh man, my staff hates it when I take plants out. This is called Agastache. So, or hummingbird mint, there's several names, but Agastache comes in several different colors. Thank you, just right there, perfect. Did you smell it? I love a big man and his smelly flower. This one does not get weedy. Gets up about, 3 feet tall or so. Perfect shaped perennial flower. And it doesn't tend to run and reseed all over the yard like a Russian sage does. There is a blue variety, so if you've got to have blue, that's a good one. But it also comes in red, orange, white. There's more colors to choose from than, let's say, Russian sage. Again, animals are not going to eat this. Javelina, no problem. Pack rats seem to leave it alone, so deer don't eat it. So it's got all the stuff you want. Full, bright sun. The more sun this is in, the more flowers you're going to get. So this is good wildflower for here. So that's, again, Firewise. I'll leave you with this one. Last plant, and then we'll go over to bark beetles. We're right on time. This is good. Actually, I'll try to speed it up. This is Lantana. Okay. Okay, so let's cover food. What you'll find here is we need to fertilize more often than other places, just because you don't have, you poor folks in the Midwest, Wisconsin. I got a buddy who's got a garden center in Wisconsin, and he winters in Sedona. He comes over and visits all the time. He's got 8 foot of topsoil in his backyard. Come on, 8 foot. I doubt if you got 8 millimeters of topsoil. So we just don't have that. And then the little topsoil you did have, the contractor took it, scraped it off, and threw it off to the side because you need footers and driveways. So really, some of you are dealing with dead soil. Or just there's not very much, there's no vitality. You won't find a worm, there's no mycorrhizal colonies, there's nothing good in the soil. And there's no nitrogen, phosphorus, or potash. There's no fertilizer. There's no naturally occurring plant foods there. So you'll find you have to fertilize a little more often. Now, let me start with your natives. I think we need to care for our native trees. Now, some of you have a lot of evergreens on your properties. I'm not talking about taking care of the forest, but some of them are real key. If you lose that tree, I'm going to look down into your living room or across, or I'll lose. The value of your house just goes down because this tree it's adding to your ambiance. Take care of those. So ones that's in the island as you drive up the driveway, take care of that. And I think it's okay to fertilize it one time a year. Fertilize it with all-purpose plant food. It's a granular food you sprinkle out there. It's all natural, so it's safe for the birds. It's safe for your pets. I wouldn't put it in their dog bowl or something, but common sense. But I would fertilize your native plants at least once a year. That's enough. Don't go overboard. I also tell my folks I help, water your natives. The key ones that are really valuable, water them, but don't overdo it. About once a month is take a soaker hose. I take one of those easy sprinkler heads, kind of bubbles things out. I stick that underneath the tree and let it run for a couple hours, once a month. And I've got beautiful, stunning, wow, natives. If you don't do that, we are seeing bark beetle is starting to attack pine trees. This is drought related. And so if you look at your pine trees, you look at the bark and you'll see a little pinhole in the bark. That is a bark beetle. They're the cutest little beetle. They're only like this big, but they attack a tree by the thousands. And they'll literally get underneath the bark and girdle. They'll eat that wood underneath the bark, and they literally will girdle the tree. It'll start at the top of the tree, then it works its all the way down towards the bottom. And once you see limbs starting to die out, it's too late. It's crossed over. You just haven't seen it yet. So, although I'm always surprised, some plants, it's worth trying. I'm surprised at the plants that come back, but if you just do a little bit of care, any kind of care, the plant can defend itself. So it can take that out. When it gets dry and it's starving to death, it can't. And there's a odor that sends off. There's some pheromone stuff, a turpentine smell. You can't smell it, but bugs, bark beetles do. Once that stressed out plant starts to send that stress signal out, it's like, party's here, boys. Everyone rally on this point. Bring chips and salsa. Who's got the beer? Let's go. And so they just start attacking this tree by the thousands. If you keep that plant watered even remotely, it's got enough to keep it going, and then fertilize it once a year with the all-purpose plant food. So you're focused, again, the big mistake too, I think at the start of the monsoon season, that's now. So usually July 4th is a marker for us. We're starting, even if it doesn't rain, it always rains. The question is how much. The humidity goes up. You can see your plants right now, it's just kind of going, oh, it was so hot. Now they're starting you can just see them starting to grow. They're starting to perk up. Take advantage of that, especially if you've got a new landscape. Fertilize it right now, and you could push a whole nother set of growth on your shade trees, on your shrubs, on any of these plants we just talked about. You can start to get them to grow again. June is our most difficult month to grow. Everyone thinks it's January because it's cold, but they're just asleep. They're hibernating. They're not doing much. June is hot. It's like in the 90s. You got a prevailing southwest wind that's nonstop. And then it's just dry as can be. It's like 10% humidity. Those three, and brand new growth. Those are four things that are just hard. You got to get things to get through June. When the rains come in July, you can turn them into a whole new plant, whole nother set of roses, whole nother set of foliage. You can take your sycamores that are all beat up and wind whipped, and they get these lush foliage to them. And so fertilize this on everything in the yard. But really, I brought it for you folks that have a lot of native things, junipers, pines, manzanitas. Use once a year, put them out there, and it'll really get them to have a whole nother color change. So they should be these rich blues, dark greens. You just have these real great Arizona colors. This is what brings the color out, okay? The other one too, this is really for you Midwest, East Coast folks. We have very alkaline water and very alkaline soil. Very unusual. It's a little bubble in the Southwest. And it's really because all the mountaintops, most of them, are old volcano cores. So Thumb Butte, it's an old volcano core. That's why it's so rugged and interesting. Well, all that ash that was around that core has now settled, and now we're gardening in it. Literally, we're gardening in ash, a lot of us, which makes the soil very alkaline. It raises the pH. If you had a pool or hot tub, you're always checking the pH. You get the pH too low, it gets real acidic. And like your skin wants to peel off when you get out of the tub. It goes too high, it gets super alkaline. The same exact thing happens. So you want to have the sweet spot or neutral pH, which is 5.5, 6.0, 6.5. You'll never reach that here. If you can keep it under 7, you are a gardener. So here we never add lime to our soil. Have you ever heard that lime sweetens the soil? Watch HGTV. They're always telling you, add lime. Don't do that here. You'll kill things. So lime actually raises the pH. Well, if you're in the areas where you have a lot of acidity, you want to do that all the time. You're adding lime several times a year. Here we never do that. Here we're always adding soil sulfur. It lowers the pH, makes things more acidic. And so you want to think in those terms. That'll be a little bit different. There where also the sun is brighter. When you're this close to heaven, you're in paradise. This is a great place to be. The sun is more intense though. So the altitude can burn things. So we really don't plant. Okay, whose phone is that? I want to know. Let's see. Right? What are the kids saying? What's going on? Anyway, just poking. That's why I love it. Most people are terrified about speaking. I love it. The bigger the crowd, the more power you have. So fertilize things, your natives. That'll help keep the bark beetles out. The other one to really watch, you can treat your plants, and I brought two things. So for me, I'm putting a soil drench. You do not need to be an arborist to do this. You just got to know when to do it and what to do it on. And so this is made really for our pine trees. This you mix up in a watering can or a 5-gallon bucket, and you're pouring it right at the trunk, right at the base, right where the crown, right where the trunk meets the soil, right there. You're putting this stuff, and the plant will actually absorb it underneath the bark and go up through the structure of the plant. And one treatment lasts a year. It's called tree and shrub drench. But really you should be doing this in March, April, somewhere in there, just as the plant is starting to flush new growth. This is going to keep the bark beetle out of your trees. Even if you have bark beetles, they're already in the tree, they're eating underneath the bark, this will go up through that trunk, through the sap, and it'll actually kill off that colony of beetles. It's also very, very effective against pinyon pine scale. We've got these, the little bit shorter pine tree, kind of a more ball-shaped, is pinyon pine. It's got a needle about that big. If you look at the needle, just pick a needle off, and if it has little dots on it, each one of those dots is an insect, and it's pierced into that needle and sucking the juices out of it. It's called a scale, pinyon pine scale. We're notorious for it. It has obliterated entire streets. Like not one is left because they just crawl from tree to tree and take it out. But you put this on once a year and it will literally get rid of pinyon pine scale. So for my neighbors, I'm the best neighbor you've ever had because I make sure my trees are healthy. And if it's a strategic tree in your yard, I'll knock on the door, hey, can I help you? You've got scale. I want to make sure that thing lives and grows and thrives because I don't want to see your backyard. It's adding to my value. So I'm trying to help you be better. And I own a garden center. I'll help you out. But this is one thing, so easy to use. You don't have to pay $600, $700, $800 to an herbalist to come spray your trees. You can do it yourself. So with tree and shrub insurance, that's how you deal with bark beetles and pinyon pine scale. Number one thing. One application lasts for an entire year. Okay? Yeah. It's called tree and shrub drench. And just go, if you don't know, and I'll send you a bark beetle handout. It's got this on it. You'll have that. Just go and you'll have a handout on all what I just said in 5 minutes or less. You'll have the handout, okay? Sayonara is a bug killer. It's a good name, and it does actually kiss your bugs goodbye. If it moves and you spray it with this, it will die. But it's not as offensive as malathion, some of those really smelly, stinky insect killers. This is as mild as you can get. It'd still be highly effective. Grasshoppers, blister beetles, bark beetle, things. If you want it dead, spray it with this. Spiders, scorpions. If you hit it, it will kill it. It'll kill it. I get little black beetles in the theater room downstairs. They crawl on. You're sitting there watching a movie and you got beetles crawling over you. That's not good. So they're coming in through the basement. They come in through the basement. They just kind of know how they get in. But I use it as a barrier around the foundation. It keeps the bugs out. So centipedes, that kind of stuff. Okay, ants, whatever it is. For my pets, no, I would not spray my pets with it. What I would do is I'll keep the pets out there until it dries, which is what, like 15 minutes. Once it's dry, you're fine. Yeah, good question. With that, I think we've come to our Q&A section. My goal is always to have you walk away with 3 things at least that you didn't know before, or maybe more. So I'm hoping for that, but if we didn't catch something, questions, this is your opportunity. What do you got? The newbie, you haven't even started the build yet. Is the foundation even poured yet? Oh, there we go. So welcome to the neighborhood. There you go. What are your names? Stephen Kelly. You now have a new neighbor. Welcome. What do you got? So fruit trees are Firewise, and they do amazingly well. You just can't grow citrus or avocados. So those are 2 you want to cross off. And then I do have, if you go to our website, watersgardencenter.com, there's a button at the top called Learn. Like Learn. Every time I teach a class, I'll have a handout, and I put those handouts on that page right there. There is a fruit tree book that I wrote that's right there. It's free. It's a PDF download. and it's got all the cross-pollination, it's got all the varieties you want to grow here. The main thing here is because we're so close to Phoenix, Palm Springs is an influence. Our university is Tucson, so U of A. I love U of A, but desert is not, those varieties do not grow. Actually, they grow up here. They don't fruit up here. They bloom too early. So you're gonna want, if you want fruit trees, which I love, you're gonna want the later blooming varieties so we get them out of that risk of frost. We're notorious for March, first part of April, it gets really nice. I mean, and the trees get tricked into blooming early, and then that last frost comes first to middle of April, and it just takes off the fruit. And so we had a brutal frost this last year. It was like we weren't expecting that. It was 19 degrees at my house in April. That's unheard of. And it burned off. It took my peaches, my cherries. I've got some apples and pears, but everything else got nipped. So you want things real late. We can help you with that. Do your homework on that. So, and whatever you do, for the love of gardening, you should not be buying a plant from a warehouse. Don't buy fruit trees from Costco. Come on, they're inside. You're taking them outdoors. They're not varieties for us. And you take them indoors to outdoors and you expect them to thrive. They're not going to do that. So you golfers, are there different grades of golf clubs? You don't want to buy your golf clubs from Big Five. You want them from a nice place. Same with plants. Buy them from Waters Garden Center. Yeah, oh, I kind of love it. Thank you. I've never tried that one before. Thank you for encouraging me. Be careful. Yeah, in the back. Yes. Yes. Great question. So we've got grasses throughout the community. And so how do we deal with the different kinds of grasses? And so we've got a lot of lawn out here too. So lawns are totally different than ornamental grass. We're kind of famous for our grasses. This is prairie, natural prairies grow here. They do great. Most grasses are pruned back in the winter to early spring. So January through March. That's when you prune them back. And I just take my weed whacker or my mower, I just go, and I'm done. Fast, just quick, just right down. I would say the one that we don't prune back enough is Pampas grass. That's the great big one, those great big huge plumes. They're beautiful here. But if you don't cut that back in that time frame, so January through first part of March, it gets brown, then you've got this new growth, which is green, intermixed with the brown. I think we need to cut that back, usually back to about knee level or so. You'll see it because you'll see these curlicue, this undergrowth to it. Cut it back to there, fertilize it with the all-purpose food. Best grass, this has got bird guano in it. If you're a grass, bird guano is like the best nitrogen source ever. Fertilize everything, fresh new grass, foliage will start coming up. Did I answer that for you? Yeah. Yeah, because they are. Sometimes. Yeah. Do you want it to stay or to go?
Well, sometimes.
So for me, I've got some very strategic scrub oaks. Some of them aren't scrub, they're emery oaks. They're trees, they're beautiful, majestic. And so they needed some cleanup. So there's this wild, you just let an oak go, it looks like it wants to rip your face off. It just like, yeah, I defy you to get through the garden, this part of the yard. So, but to clean them up can be beautiful because they get this beautiful structure to it. So for me, I keep one in front by my pond. I want it to stay short, scrub oak. So I've trimmed it up so I can see the actual bark, the trunk. So I see the structure, but I don't want it to get too tall or it blocks my pond. And so I'm strategic, keep it pruned up, but then I also keep it pruned down. So it almost looks manicured. It almost looks like it's not a native. It looks like it's been groomed. But that's what a beautiful garden is. Really, why are public gardens so appealing? Because we're taking this wild plant and we're grooming and making it beautiful, and we're taming it so that it fits this structured place. And you go, wow, I didn't even know you could do that. We're going to do something similar to that with your native landscape, your natives out there. Some of them are in the wrong place. They deserve to die. Move them, get them out of there. That's why we invented chainsaws. But some of them are in the perfect place. You want to enhance the growth of the way they look. Some of you just want to thin out so you only have one or two strategic ones, and then get rid of the rest. Thin them out. Don't let the acorns grow. Don't let the runners come up. Get rid of those. Oak is very difficult to kill, by the way. It's got a root that goes down to China. And then I think it's rooting on the other side. I think there's another oak tree on the other side of the world, wherever that is, that's coming up. So they're really tough to kill off. And so if you're trying to do that, come talk to me offline and I'll show you how to do that. We'll speed up the process. I've done it to a couple of mine. Yeah, over here. Yeah. Yeah, we have different opinions on that because there's 50 of us in the room. I'm sure, and if half of us are gardeners, there's probably 75 opinions on what the best way to do that is. Vinegar doesn't quite work. If it does, it just burns off the top. It doesn't kill the roots. So for annuals, that's perfect. But if you get something like horehound, some of these really aggressive, native, deep-rooted weeds, you need something stronger than vinegar. So what do you use? Roundup causes cancer. We know that. So I don't sell Roundup because if anyone's going to get cancer, it's the guy that's selling you Roundup. So I just cut that off 10 years ago because we knew that was coming years ago. We have a product at the garden center called Decimate. Just decimate, just like destroy weeds. It's highly, highly effective at all weeds, perennial and annual both. And it kills from the top all the way through the root structure, kills it off, all of it. So I use that myself at the garden center at my house. And here's the challenge you have here at this elevation. It cools off so much at night that many of the weed killers you try to use, weeds don't respond. They almost mock you. They might yellow a little bit, they come back with a vengeance. Roundup can be that way. It only works in summer, that is it. Because the spring and fall is so cool, it doesn't work very well. So Decimate seems to work when it's cooler. It goes down to 40 degrees, it'll still work, takes them right out. Yeah. No, I wouldn't do that. So I would say, for me, I mean, we're schnauzer people. These are small dog, we're miniature schnauzer people. And I've been married 34 years. But if one of the dogs get hurt, it's over for me. It's not going to happen. So it's completely, I got to be really careful. And so usually I'll keep the dogs out of that area until it's dry. If they're eating the grass, I would say walking on it's totally different than eating it would be different. So I would say Decimate's about as safe as you can go and still be highly effective. Otherwise, go to vinegar and just keep on it until eventually you'll keep it, but it's just going to regrow because vinegar is strictly a top burn. It doesn't kill the roots. Okay, yeah. Snakes, yeah. So are you afraid of snakes? Okay. They're all dead. So you are in snake country, right? You're at the base of the mountain. There's a lot of snakes. So we have a real benefit. There's a beautiful snake. It's about 6-8 feet long here. It's called a bull snake or gopher snake. He looks like a rattlesnake, but he's not. He doesn't have that viper head. He's got this real small head to it. He'll actually, if you intimidate him, he'll curl up like a rattlesnake and wag his tail and make this sound through his throat to imitate, to scare you off, but he's not really a rattlesnake. He doesn't have a rattle. He's just making that noise because he knows rattlesnakes are scary. Actually, gopher snakes eat rattlesnakes. They actually keep them in check. So there are real benefits. You really want to keep them around. They're spooky as all get out. Give you a quick story on this is freaky. It freaks me out. I don't mind snakes. I like them. But I had this old Forest Service guy. We were moving irrigation pipe down in Skull Valley. And these are 3-inch pipes. We're doing acres of land, gardens, orchards. We're just moving pipe together, just shooting the breeze like guys do. And there's this like 8-foot snake in the way of this next piece of pipe. He goes, just a minute. He walks over there, picks this 8-foot snake up by the tail. He starts walking him, going, I've never seen this before. Cool, you can do that? He just moves him out of the way and then kind of puts the pipe down. So with that being said, that's the only great snake story. Snakes are good. There is a migration of snakes. So generally in March, April, you'll see more snakes and more rattlesnakes because they're hibernating in their one spot all together. And then they'll crawl, or whatever they do, they'll move miles they want to spread out the feeding grounds. They're looking for mice and rats and that kind of squirrels, that kind of stuff. And so you'll see them, if you just leave them alone in that time frame, they just get really tired. And they'll just rest there for a minute and then they'll kind of move on. By that evening, they're moved on. They're just taking a break for a minute, usually out in the sun, many times on the road. They're sitting there warming themselves, just taking a break. In the fall of the year, usually end of September, October, you'll see this exact same thing happen. They're migrating. If you just leave them alone, they're just going from, they were the 2 lots over to your neighbor's house. Now they're going back to wherever they're going up in the mountains. And so you just leave them alone. But if you got dogs, you got to go shovel to the head. I mean, rattlesnakes, we like snakes at the garden center, just not rattlesnakes. So I've actually got an old coffee can. Remember coffee used to come in a tin can? I've got one of those. The crew actually decorated it for me. They call it Ken's snake can. And so whenever we see a racer, a garter snake, smaller snakes, I'll take them home, release them in my yard because they're the best things ever for keeping grasshoppers at bay, moles, that kind of stuff. So they do make a snake stopper, sort of effective. You put a barrier down next to the fence, and they don't want to cross it. It's herbal things that they smell, and they go, oh, I'm going this way. More effective when it's not rainy out. It tends to dissipate some, but you can do snake stopper, that kind of stuff. So there was another one over here, yeah. Yeah. No, all fruit trees are Firewise. There you go. All of them. Because they're all leafy, they're all deciduous, they're all heavy moisture to them. So they're all Firewise. I would say keep them cleaned up. Take any dead wood that's in your yard, get rid of that stuff. It's not only not Firewise, but it also attracts more pestilence. So woodpeckers and things are attracted to dead things. So they'll just kind of keep that stuff cleaned up out of the yard. So fruit trees are Firewise, including berries, grapes, pomegranates, figs, all the trees, they're all Firewise. Yeah, next to you. That's actually a challenge. I've struggled with that too. So it's not that they emit. So do you hear that over here? So pine trees, junipers will, what they do is they'll put a lot of droppings on the ground. What they're trying to do is they're trying to suffocate anything on their root zone so nothing can grow except them. It's total defense. So they don't want to share the water or the nutrients underneath their drip line. So you're seeing junipers, there's just always litter building up. There's always pines growing up. The reason they're doing that is to protect their root zone. So it's very difficult to get things to grow underneath in that. So what you can do is there's quite a few natives that do that very well. So when I use underneath my junipers, because again, I've pruned them up, now I've got this big open space that's always got litter coming down. It can be kind of trashy looking. Then I've got art there. I'm uplighting, downlighting. It's beautiful. I took a creeping Mahonia or creeping Oregon grape. It's a native one you're seeing grow throughout the Bradshaws, the Mingus Mountains. It grows wild. It's a low-growing, holly-shaped leaf. It's got a beautiful yellow flower in spring. It does put a little berry that the birds love, so it attracts my birds to them. But it grows like a thick mat underneath. It's Firewise. It takes all that litter. It's pretty. It looks garden-esque, and so that's a good one. The number one seller, almost embarrassed to say Vinca or periwinkle or myrtle. It's got several names, but Vinca minor is the Latin name. So that's another one that was kind of a weed But it would grow there very, very well. Yeah. So there's several. Come talk to us offline. We can show you. Something over here. Okay, good. So we got a theme going. So it's something that we have. It's kind of a challenge. So if in doubt too, so you've got, I'm a strong advocate in putting a test victim out there. So just buy one, try it, see how it does before you commit to like 20 plants. Then once you see the deer aren't going to eat it, the squirrels, you have ground squirrels here, this cute little great gray squirrel. They harvest everything. So try one before you commit all your garden dollars to it. So anything else? We're an hour and 20 in. I went way more longer than we. From the piano, play the tune, go for it. What do you want to sing next? Yeah.
Probably cotton.
Cottonwoods or ash or several.
So they were cut down and the stumps weren't removed though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Suckers.
Exactly.
Yeah. So if you're cutting, so you hear that? So down by the creek, they cut down some poplars or something like that, elms, something. There's several things that grow like that. And now they cut them, now they're suckering. So they're coming up. How do you kill the whole stump? So we've got a product at the garden center. We're getting really specialized now called Brush and Stump Killer. It's a liquid. And so you pour that on there and it will take out the root zone without killing the soil. It'll just take out the root. So cottonwoods are notorious for suckering from the stump. Elms are notorious from the stump and the roots that are left out in the yard. And so that'll kill out that entire structure. Now, with a great big tree or with an older cut, so what trees will do is they'll callus over, like you cut yourself. You get a scab, trees will do the exact same thing, and it won't receive any of that killer. What I'll do for myself, to have a bigger tree, is I'll take my cordless drill, and I'll just drill some holes on the outside edge, just where the bark, between the bark and the wood. I'll drill just a few strategic holes, just so it's fresh wood, and I can pour that on so the plant receives, that root receives a little bit more. And so I'll just pour that on full strength around that. It obliterates. It won't come back. It will be dead. It's called tree and stump killer. So come see us at the garden center. We're getting into real specialized weed killers now. Also does very well on horehound, tumbleweeds, some of those really nasty summer weeds. And this is the time of year when tumbleweeds, they grow the size of VW Beetles. I mean, just like they get huge. Yeah, you're kind of needy. This is like your fourth. Okay, gotcha. Then we're going to the folks in the back. They're just as needy. So yeah, go for it. Yeah. So it won't kill the stump really. Bacteria, nature will take care of the stump. There's some bacterial stuff that come in and just eat wood. What I do for mine, it's expensive to chip that root out. It's like a whole nother machine. It's very expensive. Twice in a row. What alarm? Are we taking our meds or what are we doing? Just poking at you. So what I'll do is, I'll cut the stump down to soil level, and then I'll kick some dirt over it. I kill it. So you don't really want to plant in the same hole as a tree that just came out of, because as those roots rot, they taint the soil. So plants don't grow very well. But you can grow just off center from that, something else if you want another fruit tree or something. And so I'll just try to cut it as low as I can, below soil level, and then I'll kick some dirt over it. I never dig the root out, because it's quadruple the price for the root out. For you folks who have unlimited money, which is American Ranch, that's okay, but for me, I don't want that much work. I don't want that size hole in my yard. There's a lot of reasons I don't dig the root out, but that's how I do it. If you just cut the stump off and use it as an asset, like a tree stand or a plant stand or something, it could take years for that to actually die off. Last question in the back, because we're starting to get restless and my voice will start going. Was there something else? Okay, we are out of here. Before you go, though, I'll let you clap. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, thank you. Thank you all. I do have a handout I'll send to you. It's called the Low Maintenance Landscape. Sounds like it's got water guides, how to fertilize, that kind of stuff. I'll send that as a link to you. Maybe I'll send that to someone here. I'll send it to you and then you can send it out to the crew. Share it as much as you want. It's a little short book on a lot of this kind of stuff. So thanks for coming, you all. I'll hang out as long as you want if I didn't get to your questions.